Broadcasting from the studio at the Levan Center of Innovation at Nova Southeastern University, welcome to Levan Center Live, featuring rockstar entrepreneurs, innovators, and those that foster the Florida business ecosystem.
Hi, and welcome back to Levan Center Live. I'm Jim Ryan. Welcome back, subscribers and those that are listening for the first time to the podcast. Of course, I'm joined here at the Innovation Center by Kelly Shanley, who's Interim Director of the Levan Center of Innovation. Kelly, hello, and welcome back again, my friend.
Good to see you, Jim.
Terrific. We've got a great podcast, and the format of the podcast is to really talk about successful entrepreneurs, the challenges, the successes that they've had, those in the academic space, civic leaders, those that foster the business ecosystem. And Kelly and I have known this, our next guest here, for quite a long time, but we were sharing earlier that sort of like having a lunch with someone, that you really don't get to know someone until you really sit down in a formal capacity and sort of ask the questions. How did you start your business, and so forth. Our guest today, Marcell Haywood of Thesis Holdings. Marcell, thank you so much for carving out the time and doing the podcast today.
Absolutely. Jim, Kelly, thanks so much for having me. Couldn't be more excited to spend some time with you both today.
Great.
So Marcell is weaved into the business community here for quite a long time, a successful entrepreneur, does a lot of philanthropic work, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But Marcell's background is quite interesting, how he grew his business and so forth. And what we do, Marcell, is we kind of like wind the clock back a little bit. So maybe you had some humble beginnings, not sure, but kind of share with us, where did you grow up and where did you go to school? And then Kelly and I will ask you some questions along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think humble beginnings is an appropriate way to characterize it. I am as close to native to South Florida as I think that you get. Both of my parents were in the Air Force, and when my mom had me, she was a colonel in or captain in the Air Force, and when she had me, she was supposed to have, I think, 6 weeks or 8 weeks of maternity leave. And a couple days after delivery, they called her back to work. She was a pediatrician, and she kind of was seeing patients, obviously, on Dover Air Force Base. And she had worked for, I don't know, years and years in anticipation of this moment. Was saving up all of her vacation and leave time, and felt pretty unhappy about the idea of not getting the appropriate amount of maternity leave that she was expecting, and so decided to pursue instead a honorable discharge. And her and my father, who was also on the base, decided to move down to South Florida, where my grandparents had moved from New York, first from Jamaica to New York, and then down to South Florida. So by the age of, I don't know, 2 months old, 3 months old, I was living in Pembroke Pines. At the time, anyone who's been around for a while knows that there were more cow pastures and bovine in that area.
Watch where you step.
Yeah, than there were human beings. And we've just seen the just unbelievable kind of transformation of our community since that point forward. Around 10 years old or so, we moved to Plantation, where my mom still lives, with my 103-year-old grandfather. We just celebrated his 103rd birthday.
Wow, that's terrific.
At TRP Taste with our friends, the restaurant people, who do a fabulous job. And the Consulate General of Jamaica actually came down to celebrate him. There's an article in the Jamaican Gleaner about this 103-year-old. And so my wife and I and our two kids, Lincoln and Avery, moved during the pandemic, actually, back to Plantation from downtown Fort Lauderdale to be closer to our parents. And so now we're in this like really sweet spot in life where we have one of those door locks that, there's a code that you can grant people access to. And we literally every 20 minutes, we hear someone punching that code or the lock unlocking, and we have our moms or a member of our family over. So been around for a very long time, and didn't go to school down here for college. I ended up at Florida State University ultimately, but I did go to elementary school here, actually at the university school here on the campus of NSU, and then moved over to St. Thomas Aquinas for high school. So I think I go back as long as you can as it relates to being a native from Broward County in particular, the South Florida area.
Now, you had a little bit of a sports career too, which I found striking. So Marcell and I had a conversation pretty recently, and I was sharing with Marcell where I went to college, and we were talking basketball, and I was shocked at his basketball acumen of my university, knowing all the knowing all the players.
What was your university?
Syracuse.
Oh,
The Orange. So they were a big basketball school.
Sure.
But Marcell knew players, and from when I went to school over 30 years ago. So I was shocked.
Right.
I found out Marcell was actually an athlete and had a nice career as a basketball player at FSU.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I'd always been a big time enthusiast around mainly team sports. I could have, I think, done pretty well in individual sports as well, like tennis and some other things that I dabbled in. But I really got excited about team sports. And Jim, really one of the main reasons I ended up at St. Thomas was to pursue kind of this next stage or next level of what I thought could be a burgeoning basketball career. Had the benefit of being, kind of given the opportunity to play varsity as a freshman, which doesn't happen very often in big high school programs, but wasn't kind of that outstanding that I got big looks from a college scholarship standpoint, and ended up at a small school in North Carolina on Selwyn Avenue in Charlotte called Queens University. It was Queens College at the time. It was an all-girls school that ended up transitioning to co-ed. It wasn't all girls when I was there, obviously, and
still predominantly.
Yeah, right. So,
I wish I would have known about that school when I was young.
There was a statistical advantage, I'll say, and played there for a year. But it was actually smaller than my high school in terms of enrollment, and didn't quite fit in, at least in terms of what I was accustomed to, and. Decided that wanted a change and moved over to Florida State, and came in as a walk-on, and kind of earned my way, I think, into the program, for lack of a better term, because I transferred in. I had to redshirt my first year, which in hindsight was fabulous. It gave me a chance to learn about big-time collegiate athletics. You realize very quickly that you're really there to learn a lot of things academically, but you're also there to get a job done, right? And so most of your life and your days are oriented around mastering your ability to contribute to a successful program. In my case, it was basketball. And so didn't travel with the team, but practiced for that first year, and then had a chance actually the next year to play, and worked my way into the backup point guard role. Behind a guy named Levan Arrington, who's a fabulous player out of New Jersey. I think he played for Bobby Hurley and his storied program there. And spent the next 3 years at Florida State playing big-time ACC basketball. Got to play in the Dean Dome and in Cameron Indoor, and all of these big programs, and just learned a ton about life, I think, in general during that time. But I always remind everyone that in hindsight, I really was a 20-20-20 guy. I only got in when we were up by 20, down by 20, or with 20 seconds left. But when I did get in, I made
the most of it.
I gave them hell.
That's right. Good. That's terrific.
So team sports, military family background, information systems, right? In college, where does entrepreneurism enter your psyche as an option?
So, Kelly, it's a great question. I had the benefit of growing up in a household with two parents that had an incredibly obvious work ethic, and who were not part of kind of the corporate machine, so to speak. My mom was a pediatrician. She knew she wanted to be a doctor since she was 5 years old or so, and just an exceptional human being, and was able to achieve that dream, obviously, early on. And I saw her work her tail off. She'd come to all of my soccer games, and at the time, there was no electronic health records. I have a great story about that in a sec. But so doctors had to carry around their charts from their patients. And so she'd lug them around in a bag that she carried over her shoulder. And she would essentially kind of fill out all of the charts and kind of sign things that needed to be signed during my soccer games. And she'd only look up when I scored a goal. And all the other parents said, "Great job, Marcell." And she'd look up and she would cheer, and then her head was right back down. So I learned early on that if you're committed to something and you have a passion for something, you can chart your own course. Just watching her. And my dad was the same way. He's got a very interesting story. Out of the military, he joined Pembroke Pines Police Department. First in a road responsibility, joined the academy, came out of the academy, worked the road for a few years, and then got recruited by the DEA and ended up working most of his career in undercover narcotics, where he was effectively building cases against drug dealers. And by the way, this is in the Cocaine Cowboys era,
Wow.
as you can imagine.
Busy time for him.
There's a
I'm
lot
sure.
going on. And but he also, I think, was astute enough to know that that wasn't a career that he could kind of retire doing well into his 60s or 70s. And so he would spend his spare time doing things entrepreneurial. So he started a Subway shop called All American Hero over in Pembroke Pines, and had a handful of other, I would say, kind of hustles, let's call it, which were small businesses. I didn't realize that this at the time. These were small entrepreneurial startups that he was trying to put enough time and capital into to scale up over time. And I saw that incredible, I would say, courage from him as well to step out of a more of a structured environment and try to build something on his own. And I think that's kind of maybe where the entrepreneurial spirit really comes from. And then I also, I have some personality quirks that I think are not conducive to succeeding in corporate America, I'd say. I only had one job my entire life. I got hired by Mass Mutual out of college. And I only did this because I thought that I had to do something, putting my degree to work. And it just wasn't a fit for me. I think I quit a few minutes or so before I was about to get fired. Like I saw the guy coming down the hallway, and he was marching towards my office, and I jumped out of the door and I said, "I quit." As he was saying, "I fire you. I'm firing you." And from that moment forward, I just really never looked back. So I think that's where it comes from. I will share I mentioned a funny story around all of my mom's charts. My first business, actually, in college, where I felt this entrepreneurial bug, I was mentored by a handful of the boosters at the time at Florida State. We'd cut their grass over the weekends and ask them questions about business. And I mentioned to this one booster that I wanted to go to business school. And he just stopped and he kind of looked at me and he kind of, tipped down his glasses and he said, "Hey, Marcell, why don't you just go start a business? You'll learn a heck of a lot more that way." And that made a lot of sense to me. And so the one that I chose to start initially in partnership with a couple friends in the CS school, computer science school, we called it iMed Data. And it was an electronic health records software business before EHRs were actually a thing. Wow. For the audience, EHRs would be like Modernizing Medicine or Epic or these big software platforms that help healthcare providers run their business. And we did our best. We were capital constrained. I didn't have two nickels to rub together, and my partner at the time didn't either. So it didn't go as far as we'd hoped. But that was like my first taste of actually taking something out of the ground and really trying to build something or bring something into reality that didn't previously exist.
Yeah.
And then, so taking from that, that failure, if you would be a huge discouragement to a significant population base that would go, "You know what? I did that, didn't work out. Maybe I'll go back to that boss at Mass Mutual and ask for forgiveness and see if I can reclaim that opportunity again." But you decided to persevere and go, "You know what? I'm drinking the Kool-Aid here with this entrepreneurship." You then decided to do something else and continue this effort. So what brought you then to the next opportunity as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, and Jim, I think just from a purely philosophical standpoint, I'm like a quintessential contrarian. I really think the biggest opportunities in life are discoverable when you're reverse commuting against the direction, the momentum and inertia that any crowd is building. And so that's what corporate America feels like to me. Nothing wrong with it. I'm not, this isn't, this isn't a disparaging statement about careers in corporate America, but just for me, I really felt like if I did what everyone else did, I'd get what everyone else gets. And I wanted to find a way to chart my own course. And that's kind of, I think, an innate, instinctual kind of characteristic that I have, which I think made that path, at least for me, not really an option. And so to answer your question, during that period of time when we were building iMed Data, I'd also kind of gotten exposed to this concept of a services business, traditional service companies in particular. What we were effectively doing in Tallahassee during the off season was turning around rental properties for all of the boosters who owned, kind of apartment units or condominium units or multifamily units. So as the students went away during spring and winter breaks, we would put fresh coats of paint on the wall, put new carpets down. And we grew that small operation to about 75 or so employees, seasonal employees. Wow. And really the reason I was interested in it, I had a partner at the time who was also my teammate, a fabulous human being. And he was more of the operational end of it, and I was kind of more of the business end of it. And my interest was just learning how businesses worked, how to understand debits and credits, run the accounting and run all the mechanics that makes any business go. But even though I never spent a lot of time or attention on that company, it always just kind of got bigger and got more interesting over time. And it just had this inertia behind it, and realized that there really is this tremendous opportunity at the intersection of modern, kind of innovative or emerging technologies, which we applied a lot to that small little operation, in traditional industries. And it's actually the thesis behind Thesis Holdings, where we test and pursue these ideas that we think are emerging at that intersection. And that's led us mainly into everything that we're focused on today, which is almost entirely B2B software and services, all at the intersection of emerging tech and old, antiquated industry.
So we're getting a sense of, how entrepreneurism entered your mindset and you started to get involved. So you've got the bug. Yeah. And now you're learning. So along the way, as an entrepreneur, what are some of the big lessons you learned, either through failure or advice from a mentor or whatever it was? What are the things that most profoundly affected your path?
Kelly, it's a great question. I would say I've been so fortunate to have had such a diverse cross-segment of people take an interest in me over the course of my kind of entrepreneurial journey. From early on, I think because I was the young guy with big aspirations, and people wanted to help me kind of learn some hard lessons that they'd already learned themselves. But even now, like as I'm a little bit more mature, I'm no longer the youngest guy in the room, which is a little bit of a shocker to me sometimes. There's still people taking interest in my career as that ambition continues to grow. And so my way of saying, there's a really long list there, but the ones that I think are the most impactful and kind of prescient, at least for me, are this idea that building and growing a business is about intelligence, or it's about smarts, and the truth is it's about perseverance and resilience. And the way I think your level of persistence or your level of resilience is more exponentially, in my view, more tightly correlated to your probability of being successful than whether or not you're the smartest guy in the room. And actually, being the smartest guy in the room is more of an indicator that you're less likely to have the level of success that you're looking for. And that felt kind of counterintuitive to me early on, and those are some of the early lessons that I kind of learned. I also had a business coach, a guy named Robert Craven, a fabulous guy, who, and another business leader in our community that many of you guys would know, who both individually gave me, in some way, permission, because I was looking for, some leadership around this, but also gave me inspiration to follow my passions. And I never was convinced until I found some inspiration from them that I could follow my passion, be authentic in terms of my leadership style, and pursue the business opportunities that I thought were real, and not in that were truly unconventional, and have the level of success in those endeavors that I was actually looking for. And both of them, in their own independent ways, really helped me get past that and build things that I thought the world needed to have. And so that's what we're up to today.
You do a lot of philanthropic work. I keyed in on that early on in our conversation, that it seems to be a real component of your makeup. Yeah. And it seems to be really important to you. You and I met many years ago at Tech Runway at Florida Atlantic University, one of the first accelerator programs and mentorship there. You're on the board of governors here at the Levan Center of Innovation, plugging in a mentorship program here. The idea of how inspiring and the key learnings that you picked up from your early mentors. You're very much involved today in sort of the idea of paying it forward.
Yeah.
What does being a mentor now mean for you? So now as you've matured yourself, I know you're donating a lot of your time to these accelerators we just talked about. What does the idea of mentorship mean to you now as you pay it forward?
Yeah, Jim, I'm so grateful for the time and energy that people have invested in me. And that's, I think, part of the equation. I'd call it 70% of the equation. And it compels me to want to pay that same amount of energy, if not more, in time forward. But there's also a 30% of the equation, that's wasn't the best experience for me. And that's when I was looking for guidance, leadership, or interest from folks that probably could have really helped me at certain stages of my journey, and they didn't for whatever reason. And it's not saying anything negative about any of those folks, but I felt let down in those moments. And I understand better now that there's pressure on time, and we have limited kind of resources in terms of time and energy. But I do my best to show up for folks when I think that they really could use something that I have to offer in those moments. So, the first 70%, which was very positive, I think gives me the momentum and kind of the interest in doing it. But there's also the 30% where I'd love to spare someone else that same experience in any kind of way that I can. The other part of this for me is that I'm a team sports guy. In my heart of hearts, I'm a competitor, and I kind of see the world in a pretty binary way. It's we're competing for everything, and we're all on teams. And I see our region, I see our community, I see the organizations that I'm a part of as my team, and I want to help my team win the game. And there are other folks competing for resources or competing for, if it's in a free market environment, competing for customers. And I just kind of, see the world that way, kind of very, very, very simply. And so when I do get involved in things in the community, it's because I'm serious. I feel like there's a sense of duty to help those organizations win. And I do whatever I can, obviously, to be value additive, and in the time that I do invest.
Everything you've said to us this point comes into this question, right? So I'm going to turn the competition around to talk about competition for your time, your brain space, your time in the day, your heart, just all of it. You're clearly committed to your family. We spent the first part of this talking a little bit about your family history and your connection to your family. Jim just asked you about, your commitments to others through philanthropy and mentorship. But then also there's this clear work ethic around the work that you do. All of those things take time. Yeah. How do you think about how you use your time, how you manage your time? How do you prioritize anything you can help us with here, and because we all kind of fight that battle, right?
Yeah, 100%. And, Kelly, you and I, we've talked a little bit about this offline and in our private conversations. And I will, just vulnerably say it's the biggest challenge I think that I have. And I'm in a stage of life where I think the complexity is at the upper end of the range. I've got young kids, got a beautiful, lovely wife that is incredibly supportive of me, but has things that she needs from me as well in our marital space. I have companies that I'm involved in. Many of them are young startup age types of companies, and they tend to be very needy at that stage. And then even others that are more mature, evolving, right? And they still need you involved in a really real way. I have parents that I love very dearly, and I want to build and invest in those relationships. And then then you have your friends, obviously, in addition to your immediate family. So that's a lot of buckets for a finite amount of time and resource. And where I've landed, and not that I do this well or elegantly, but where I've landed is that work-life balance isn't a thing. It's a mirage that gets sound bites and clicks online. But I don't know that anyone can practically put that into practice. If you think about an Olympian, for instance, no one's expecting an Olympian or an NBA champion or whoever to have work-life balance. They train every single day. Michael Phelps, I think, said that he trained 8 years consecutively without missing a single day. Don't quote me on the number of years, but you guys get the point. And I think that same concept applies in life. And so I think more about how to create harmony between those buckets and how to move resources and time and energy to the bucket that might need the most of me in that moment. And I do it very poorly. Sometimes, most of the times it's reactively, if I'm candid, and I rely on people around me who can communicate with me openly and honestly and say, hey, I really need you in this moment. And I show up 100% of the time, but without that nudge, sometimes I might miss my opportunities, right? Because I'm so focused on what is inevitably an ambitious kind of effort or endeavor on the business and entrepreneurship side of things, or I'm so focused on our kids or so focused in my relationship. So, I think that's probably, for me personally, one of the biggest opportunities is I think I've got the right philosophical approach, but how can I be more elegant, and smoother in the transitions between those various buckets and allocating resources in a way that feels kind of less herky-jerky to the folks that I care about that are around me is, I think, a big opportunity. And I'll make one last comment. Entrepreneurship is, Elon says this, I think, in the best way. It's like, what does he say? It's like chewing glass and staring into the abyss. And Jim, you'd know this as well. It's, the best way for me to describe it beyond that is you really just give it everything that you have and you hope that it's enough. That's really what it is at the core. And, just given your limited time and resources, how do you proactively invest in some of these other buckets, knowing that this one bucket will take everything that you have, and maybe you have a probability of succeeding. And so I always, my heart always goes out, and I've got a really soft spot in my heart for entrepreneurs. Most of the time it's a lonely journey, although, it's sexy for the media and you see folks on the cover of magazines. It's a real hustle, a real struggle, real challenge behind the scenes, leading any company, especially taking one out of the ground and trying to get it to market and overcome all the challenges that are inevitably part of doing anything extraordinary. So, just my way of saying, if anyone's listening that is married, friends, connected to an entrepreneur in any way, do the best that you can to support them in their mission. And if you're an entrepreneur, do your best to be sensitive, aware, conscientious around what other folks in your life that you care about also need from you along the way.
Those are great nuggets to pass on for sure. And I want to continue that theme for a few more minutes. So now with Thesis Holdings, and now you're on the other side where you're looking at potentially as an investor, or looking at opportunities to partner and with organizations, other companies. You've had this incredible background and track record already as an entrepreneur. For our listeners, subscribers, these startup founders, you're on the other side of the table, and now you're looking at startups themselves. What are the ingredients now that you're looking at another Marcell? And what are you seeing as part of the potential success formula that might interest you to write a check to that startup company?
Yeah, and just to caveat a little bit, I realized along the way, I don't know, a couple of years ago or so, that I'm not the best kind of investor, like pure play investor. I get too passionate about the stuff that we're after, that we're trying to take down. And I do much better, I think, actually, as more of a player coach. At this stage in my career, I still have a lot of energy, still have lots that I want to kind of accomplish, whether that's through a company that I've started myself or through someone else's company that I might have made a small investment in. So we're not doing as much of that today. But when I was doing that, I was 100% focused on the founder, and just kind of to draw a parallel to my earlier comment about resilience. I like to look for folks that have faced adversity in their life, understand how they dealt with that adversity, and also folks that are so passionate about what they're doing that they're willing to make the sacrifice that's required to get any product to market, to get any company out of the starting gates. It really is such a difficult endeavor to pull off that you need someone who's just rock solid on the intestinal fortitude side of things, or on the intestinal fortitude scale. And that's really what I'm almost 100% focused on. I have to believe in the idea. I'm generally not an expert in any of the areas when I'm talking to other founders or folks with startups. It's more about, can I get to conviction that they have real domain in that space, that they can execute the plan. And to me, the execution is not just about being the smartest guy or gal. It's more about, can you stay in the game, take enough punches long enough to learn the requisite lessons? And then finally, are there enough of the other ingredients that are necessary? Even if I were to come in to someone's cap table or wire in, I'm a small check at the end of the day. There's a lot of other things that would need to happen or come into play for that company to succeed. And so what does it look like for them in terms of access to capital? Or, are there other sources that they can lean on that would allow them to execute kind of the full plan? And so those are really my three main criteria. And if I were to, and I listed them in kind of stack ranked order, but to weight them, I'd say it's like 60% founder, kind of 20% of that second stage, and 10% whether or not I think they can find, or 20% if they can find more resources, because I can help them with that as well.
So Thesis has a thesis.
Thesis has a thesis, yeah. and when we're executing things, I really we think that the biggest returns over the course of the rest of our lives is really going to come from that intersection of transforming old industry, unlocking new business models, path to market, new value props for those customers, by bringing a little bit of the future into the present and helping it to improve the past in terms of how things were done previously. So a lot of what we get really interested and excited about that we try to execute ourselves kind of lives in that space.
Let me go back on the founder part of the equation here at 60% driving, how you see their success rate. And then, as Jim did, getting back to you, in your remarks and in your stories, there's a lot of self-awareness coming through that has allowed you to make good adjustments on your path. There's a good amount of vulnerability in there, so you're open to that input. Are those things that you think, first of all, are they natural for you, or are they more intentional because they're necessary? And the follow-up question would be, are those things or other things the attributes you look for in a founder?
Wow, that's a great question, Kelly.
Sorry, it's a lot.
No, it's fabulous. And I would, and I'll answer it in two ways, because I think, like a lot of things in life, it's a little bit of both. I think I had a natural propensity to be introspective, and I'm naturally a low ego guy. And so, when ego is not soaking up all of the space in your world, there's room for other things to live and exist. Mm-hmm. I also think changing your mind and being able to understand and accept other points of view is actually a big sign of intelligence, right? And so there's room for all of that in my life. And I think that's allowed me to learn over the years introspectively around areas where I needed to grow or improve. I will tell you guys, full stop, there's no question in my mind that my growth rate, personal development-wise growth rate, is probably the single biggest limiting factor to any company that I'm leading or involved with. Mm-hmm. And I learned that early on, which led me, wanting to succeed so badly, led me to be really open to critical feedback, constructively provided, where I sought out coaches, personal development coaches, business coaches. I'm part of organizations of other kind of peers, entrepreneurs or executives now, constantly asking them for feedback or to leverage that network to help understand how I could be doing things better or differently. And then finally, so I think those two things are kind of related to some extent. Mm-hmm. And then finally, I do have a very deep and sincere sense of duty to everything that I'm involved in. I feel like people depend and rely on me. If you're working for a company that I'm involved in, either as the CEO or if I'm in the background, I wake up every single morning acutely aware of the fact that folks are depending on me to be good at my job. And if I'm too ego-driven or heads in the sand or unwilling to do the work, that's unfair to the folks that have trusted me with this stage of their career. And that's a very real thing for me. And I think it's the combination of those three things that have allowed me to kind of grow over the years. And I've got lots, I've obviously got lots of growth to do. But that's kind of the way that I look at it.
Yeah. Great.
That's great. I love the self-awareness, the humility, some levity splashed in there as well, and all of those things. You have wonderful ingredients, and it's sort of counterintuitive what you hear from entrepreneurs sometimes, because you mentioned about ego. So many entrepreneurs are so enamored in their ego that they can't take advice because they believe that they are the expert. And Marcell is a testimony here of his success, that he has so been a recipient and welcoming to getting that sort of coaching and advice, and not being necessarily the smartest man in the room, although I think he is the smartest man in the room in a lot of the rooms that he's in. So, Marcell, I want to thank you very much for taking the time. I know you're super busy. You do so much work out in the community. I mentioned that earlier with the Alliance here in Broward County, throughout the state, here at the Levan Center and so forth. People are listening today. They want to get a hold of you. How do they reach out to you, Marcell?
Yeah, 100%. So anyone who wants to reach out can catch me on LinkedIn. I think it's linkedin.com/Marcell Haywood. Very straightforward, or some variation. You can figure it out for sure. Today I'm not only the founder, but also the chief executive of Encompass. Encompass is a B2B software and services business. And effectively, what we're building is currently a national platform that helps real estate owners and operators run their facilities more efficiently. And we're leveraging a ton of really interesting, new, emerging frontier technologies to do that. And so, really excited about Encompass. If you want to learn more, you can visit us at encompassonsite.com. And yeah. Those are the two best ways, I think, to get a hold these days.
And he still has the pitch down, which is wonderful. So, Marcell Haywood, CEO of Thesis Holdings, thanks so much for taking the time and being on the podcast today.
Awesome. Jim, Kelly, thanks guys so much. It was great.
Thanks again, my friend.
All right, of course.
Remember to subscribe, like, and share the Center Live podcast, and follow us on all social media. If you're interested in sponsoring or appearing on the podcast, please email Levan Center Live. Our email is innovation@nova.edu.